Since I was a kid, I've always loved Daredevil. Being raised as a Marvel fan, I naturally gravitated towards both him and Spider-Man. So anytime I was provided the opportunity, I would stock up on as many back issues that my local comic shop would have in their dollar bins. The first comic I remember reading was Spectacular Spider-Man number 110, which had both Daredevil and Black Suit Spider-Man fighting on the cover. I only found out later that this issue was a part of the Death of Jean DeWolf storyline, but that's not what sold it for me. When I got it as a kid, I picked up this specific issue because I knew that it had two of my favorite heroes colliding, and that's all I needed to know. And now you might be asking, why Daredevil? And would you believe me if I told you it was the Ben Affleck movie? I mean, yeah, by today's standards, it's pretty outdated, but in 2003, and me being like 6 years old, that might as well have been Citizen Kane. I mean, the movie had everything. Colin Farrell playing a sadistic and psychopathic Bullseye, Ben Affleck as the titular blind brawler, Michael Clark Duncan's Kingpin serving as the blueprint for villains radiating aura, and don't forget the Evanescence soundtrack. Flash forward a couple of years and I start going to the comic shop less and less, but I never lost my adoration that I had for these characters. The spark would be reignited in 2015 with season 1 of Daredevil on Netflix. That, taking primary inspiration from Frank Miller, made me want to start reading Daredevil comics. I quickly became enamored with the character all over again and decided to read all of his comics from Frank Miller's character-defining run all the way up to the modern day. Considering that the show has returned with season 4, I decided that I wanted to make a video about my favorite run and the woman who reshaped Daredevil in the wake of Daredevil Born Again. But before we get into that, let's hear a word from our sponsors. I want to extend a sincere thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, and if you want to help support the channel, you can subscribe for as low as $1 per month, getting my videos early and access to the community Discord. And now, back to the show. Ann Nocenti didn't originally set out to write comics, and had no intentions of applying to work for Marvel. As she states in multiple interviews, she wanted to be an artist since she was a child, and even studied painting / etching / printmaking in college. She says that after college, she moved to New York City with her art portfolio, attempting to get a career in the field she had dedicated her life to. The jobs never came. That is until she stumbled on an ad in Village Voice for a writing position. The job didn't include the company, but needing something beyond her current position as a bartender, she decided to take a shot in the dark and apply. It wasn't until she arrived to the address listed on the ad that she realized she was applying for Marvel Comics. Previously, she was relatively familiar with the ideas of superheroes, but hadn't read comics beyond Dick Tracy, Pogo, and Archie comics. Wanting a job in the creative field, she took the position, being hired by Denny O'Neil. Nocenti's first published comic work was Bizarre Adventures number 32 in 1982, illustrated by Greg LaRocque. She would then have a recurring writing credit for Spider-Woman, starting with issue number 47 and finishing with issue 50. The series had already been predetermined to be ending with issue number 50 prior to Nocenti being hired onto the book, but Marvel Editorial would be able to utilize a new writer to kill off the titular character and see how she responds to working within the editorial framework of continuity. Alongside increasing work for writing comics, she would also begin to serve as assistant editor for Al Pilgrim, Carl Potts, and Louise Simonson. Nocenti would highlight Simonson as her greatest mentor for understanding the many roles within the industry. She would then work her way up to series editor for the X-Men line of comics after Louise Simonson's departure. This is when she would work alongside Chris Claremont for his seminal run on the many X-Men titles. If you want some more information regarding Chris Claremont's X-Men run, I highly support friend of the channel's video for Every Kind of Geek, which is going to be up in the top right hand corner. This leads to her beginnings on Daredevil alongside Barry Windsor Smith with issue number 236. But first, we need need to speak about Frank Miller's character-defining run and its subsequent ramifications. Frank Miller began work on the Daredevil series alongside Roger McKenzie with issue number 158. Miller was beginning to make a name for himself and have an explosive rise in the comics industry as an artist, but hadn't yet established himself as a writer. Frank became increasingly dissatisfied regarding working with McKenzie, as he believed the scripts delivered were subpar. Everything changed when Denny O'Neil came on board as editor for the series. O'Neil was brought on to remedy the dwindling sales, almost leading to the title being cancelled outright. As he witnessed the frustration by Miller and being impressed by a backup that was written by him, O'Neil decided that he would bet on this new rising star. Denny would move Roger McKenzie to scripting other work and allow for Frank Miller to take on the series as writer and artist with issue number 168. After this change, sales would see an immediate increase as soon as 3 issues later, which Marvel would respond to by promoting the bi-monthly series to a monthly regular ongoing. And we're in Miller time, baby! Ninjas, deadly ex-girlfriends, and darker themes. It's the 80s. We're never gonna die! If you're interested in a dissection on Frank Miller's run on the character, I highly recommend Owen Likes Comics' recent video. I even have a cameo. Long story short, Miller revitalized a series that was on the verge of collapse. The book would introduce a seclusionary tone, maintaining that Daredevil would only reside within the confines of Hell's Kitchen. While most assume that Miller would have some sort of grim, dark tone, it's actually pretty funny. He was able to maintain the idea of a Marvel book being the world outside your window, while also allowing for that world to not be clouded by rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia. The 80s were historically a time of increasing violence and drug trade, so Frank allowed for the book to be authentic to that time, while also serving as a character study on the titular hero. Miller would depart the title and his historic run with issue number 191. This is not only the last issue of this seminal run, but it's also my favorite one-shot issue that doesn't have Jack Kirby's name on it. This would be a deconstruction of Matt Murdock's adversarial relationship to Bullseye, showing Matt grieving after the recent murder of Elektra at the hands of Bullseye. In 1986, DC Comics released The Dark Knight Returns, written and drawn by Miller, which would be one of the most influential books for the character as well as the comics industry at large. Simultaneously, Miller would return to Daredevil in hopes of replicating the same level of prestige for the Man Without Fear that he was able to provide for Batman. Beginning with the issue number 227, he would team up with artist David Mazzucchelli to tell Daredevil Born Again. The series would have Kingpin obtaining Daredevil's secret identity of Matt Murdock, to which he would fundamentally dismantle the hero's life. Born Again would destabilize the status quo for the character, resulting in Matt Murdock being disbarred, dissolved of assets, and required Daredevil to rebuild himself as the Man Without Fear. This status quo would begin the tradition of radical changes to the life of Matt Murdock, as one writer would be bringing their run to a close and preparing for another writer to take on the title. The impact of this 9-part epic would cement the creative team in comics history, but also would be proven to be difficult to follow. Editor at the time, Ralph Macchio, would begin auditioning writers by way of single-issue tryouts, hoping to find a talent who could maintain the prestige of the book and not inhibiting sales. As stated previously, Nocenti would have her beginning on the title with issue number 236, working with artist Barry Windsor Smith. The issue would introduce Jack Hazard, a victim of US covert agencies manufacturing super soldiers. This character was created as a means to echo the themes presented by the creation of Nuke in the pages of Born Again. This new character would delve deeper into the psyche of soldiers that are the lasting result of the American dream. Hazard would be sought after by Daredevil and Black Widow, with Matt wanting to save him before he could duplicate the destruction laid by Nuke, and Natasha being instructed by US agencies to kill him. This would lead to Hazard taking his own life at the end of the issue, forcing the heroes and the reader to face the impacts of violence. This is going to be a running motif throughout this run, but we'll get back to that later. After this issue, Macchio would offer Nocenti the title, as he believed in her capabilities, but also also believing her previous ignorance to superheroes could be a benefit in regards to not being creatively stifled when following Miller. When asked about her experience taking on the title following Miller's run, Ann Nocenti stated,
"It was daunting to take over after him. I just assumed everyone would hate everything I did and they'd throw my ass right off the book. So that mindset actually liberated me to do whatever I wanted and have fun for the short party I thought it would be. I wrote with a last meal on death row mentality. Beyond that, Daredevil's character is so interesting. He himself suggested the paths I would take. And beyond that, I imagine my brain is very different from Miller's, so the story's just naturally veered off on a different path than his."
While Nocenti was given the reins as the series' regular writer for the title, the challenges would be yet to come. Alright, let me be honest, I think that there was a learning curve when she was going to write The Man Without Fear, and you can see her lack of confidence in those early issues. In issue number 238, with artist Sal Buscema, the story tackles morality through the lens of heroes and villains, told by way of having Sabretooth face off against Daredevil. The complexity comes when the narrative presents a parallel of a boy in the community being conflicted on his own morality. Although he is strict about following rules, his peers that are rebellious seem to have more fun than him. The emphasis on morality and violence are palpable throughout the run, but in this specific issue, there's an underlying tone of the toxicity and masculinity. It also outlines that the justified are able to defend, while the oppressive are the offenders. The complexity and social commentary continues in issues number 239 and 240 with artist Lewis Williams. This two-part story introduces the new villain Rotgut, which, if you're wondering, yes, he is as gross as the name implies. Rotgut seeks out to cleanse the filth within New York, leading to a murdering spree targeting all citizens that he believes to be the source of societal decay. These deviants, of course, are the ones that are ostracized, and Rotgut assumes the role of judge, jury, and executioner. If I'm to analyze the intent, Rotgut almost seems like the amalgamation of the conservative ideology in the late 80s. If I'm being more specific, there was a push to dehumanize people that were seen as poisonous to society. So if you keep this in mind, Rotgut operates to spread his will like dehumanizing ideology spreads. I feel like most of the stories begin to become more cohesive and narrative at issue number 242 with Keith Pollard. The establishment of the story focuses on a man who is representing the workers of a local chemical plant, meeting with their wealthy employer. While scarfing down a multi-course meal, the owner says to the employee, No, you're wrong. Gold Cadillacs are the whole point. Solid gold Cadillacs are what's driving this country. Of course it's absurd, but so is capitalism. And capitalism is why this is a great country. That's the dream, kid. You work hard all your life and a few of us get gold caddies. Then we drag the rest of you along, you and the whole economy. Those gold caddies give a lot of men jobs, put meals on tables. But so what? Do you think I'm so lucky? My greatest pleasure is food. I plan to eat well till I die. As for the rest of it, I just don't know. I conquered the American dream. That was something, but I'm not sure what. Someday, Joe, maybe you'll be lucky like me and conquer the dream. Have everything you ever wanted, then you'll see. You see, Joe, I was born poor and painfully worked my way to affluence. I'm living proof of the dream. As for the rest of you, you can do what I did, or you can sit back and let trickle-down economics take care of you. Listening to this, Joe reaches a breaking point and force feeds his boss until he chokes and dies. Not only does the owner serve as the epitome of capitalistic greed, but also the ideology of you can just pick yourself up by your own bootstraps regarding labor rights. Specifically as a result of the Reagan administration as well as the Cold War, Americans were subjected to propaganda that any person can succeed under capitalism. That's just not true. This was a manufactured framing by the government to dissuade any dissenters, especially how the government protects the rich and the people that own the most capital. Capitol. The way that this was implemented was to demoralize any dissenters by way of Red Scare propaganda. The Cold War was also fought internally in the United States, so anybody who criticized capitalism was automatically deemed non-American or commies. Moving back to the story, Joe is riddled with guilt and contacts the police, but the police brush him off. As a result of this, he contacts the Daily Bugle, and he speaks to a reporter by the name of Simon. Simon attempts to calm Joe down and says he would be right there. Upon arriving, it's shown that Joe decided to give the crime scene an artistic flair. In hopes of not being demonetized, let's just say that he got creative and smeared ketchup everywhere. Yeah, I'm sure that that'll definitely make you not look guilty. Joe goes on to tell Simon that he's making a statement and he would rather die a symbolic martyr. Simon then uses this story to his professional gain, choosing to further radicalize Joe and reporting on it all the while. I saw this story as a meditation of exploitation under capitalism. As I stated previously, the run explores the mythical falsehood that is the American dream. This story in particular says that capital owners exploit their workers and it'll inevitably lead to a class consciousness uprising. Funny enough, Ann Nocenti inadvertently predicted the Occupy Wall Street movement of the early aughts. Additionally, the narrative shifts the focus to how this reporter is exploiting Joe, a man who is obviously not of sound mind, but he's radicalized into further murders and making money on the creation of paranoia. The story also utilizes its time to deconstruct the duality between Daredevil and Matt Murdock by having Karen Page call into question his use of violence. She's troubled by the duality in his life because as Matt, he's affectionate and loving, but as Daredevil, he's brutal and violent. Nocenti ensures to include this as a Rorschach test for the reader, as a means to say, when is violence justified? Where do we draw the line between a crime of passion and a routine callousness for brutality? The themes are only elaborated upon with issue number 248 and the first appearance of Carl Burbank Bushwhacker. The issue delves into the psychosis of anti-mutant bigotry and how the lust for dehumanization is led to its natural conclusion. Bushwhacker begins hunting down mutants and murdering them as a means of cleansing the streets of New York. This was the issue that I felt as if the ideas originating from Rockgut began to provide the stories with further depth. Bushwhacker allows for the tact of getting these messages across, but also allowing for tonal cohesion. This issue was also the beginning of what is considered to be the establishing status quo for the series. It includes the free legal clinic created by Karen and Matt, serving the community through legal advice and substance abuse assistance. It also includes Matt witnessing a child named Tyrone being blinded by illegal chemical dumping originating from a company by the name of Kelco. Lastly, it establishes Foggy Nelson has vacated his previous position as a defense attorney and is now practicing as a prosecutor for corporate law. I'm gonna get back to this in a moment. As the story draws to a close, so too does the lack of confidence for Nocenti. She began with varying artistic collaborations while getting a further understanding of how to best portray her unique vision for the series.
I think her style of prose is like really unique and really like kind of pulls you in because it's so unique. Like the way she paints this picture of like New York and all of these characters, right, that inhabits it during her run. They feel like, again, like, I've been told, and actually is like advice, don't use the word surreal unless something is like literally surreal, unless you're like literally tripping out on something. But I don't know if I can find any other really words that describe some of Nocenti's stuff, and it feels kind of poetic in a way. Like I think of the earlier issues, it's like stuff like Rotgut or whatever, or like even in Inferno, right, when like the demons are running around, and like just the way it's painted is so engaging, I think, to
read, especially coming out as like a writer. I also think her handling, of like political issues, and this isn't to say that it was never really done in Daredevil before. Miller, obviously, but like I think the way she integrates it is such like a major focus of the run, and a lot of it, rather than kind of it just being in a couple issues and at the end of the day, there's like Robin Hood element to it, and it's playing on a lot of the tensions people were feeling at the time regarding like wealth and distribution and stuff like that. And I thought that was like a really, it's a really interesting point.
Bum, 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 bum. While the ramifications of Born Again continued to permeate throughout the title, Nocenti was able to give Matt Murdock a fulfilling life. So what, he wasn't a big-time lawyer anymore, and the bond between Foggy Nelson and him had been severed, but like his father, he refused to be down for the count. Nocenti made it a point to firmly establish the rebuilding of Matt's life to be a result of him embracing his community. This would fundamentally shift Matt from a reclusive one-man army against crime to now serving as a leading force behind community organizing. This is best exemplified within issue number 252 and 253, the former serving as a tie-in to Fall of the Mutants, and the latter being a one-shot Christmas special. Within the pages of 252, Hell's Kitchen experiences a blackout caused by the event, which leads to the community spiraling into chaos. Not only does Matt Murdock rally his community akin to the biblical shepherd tending to his flock, but as Daredevil, he's able to subdue those that would exploit the uncertainty and anxiousness. In issue number 253, Matt Murdock and Daredevil are able to spread holiday cheer while also imparting lessons of righteousness onto the children within the community. Do you know how funny it is to watch Matt Murdock spread holiday cheer while Willie is just obsessing over the next way to destroy his nemesis? That is comedy gold. It was me, Matthew. Truly, this new direction gave both Matt and his alter ego meaning, but it also did one additional thing: fulfilled his hierarchy of needs. This hierarchy is something that I use as almost a barometer for good storytelling within Daredevil runs going forward from this point. The primary proponent being that Daredevil needs a focus on correcting societal injustices, be it as a defense attorney or as a vigilante. It's the insistence of uplifting the downtrodden, inverting the oppressor versus the oppressed power dynamic, which provides shades of Robin Hood characterization for the man without fear. Now, in saying this, Nocenti never settles for the vague illusions of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, but actually looking at the real life implications and how to utilize them in everyday life. This ranges from Daredevil dealing with slumlords and the abuse of their tenants, as well as corporations victimizing the communities.
I think something with this run in particular is that it kind of injected me with just so much Sonder. There's just so much depth to the people in the city that Daredevil is interacting with, but even the ones he's not, it kind of, we know Daredevil's a superhero. We know he fights crime, but what is crime? And I just love the way that she delves into that and just what makes people go into these seemingly less favorable lives. Even if inadvertently superhero comics can kind of demonize of just criminals and drug addicts and stuff, but showing that as a community, it's just also, it's really helped me a lot in tough times of just knowing people who are struggling with addiction and just going forward. This run has been really helpful for me with that, especially with the clinic era, which I love so dearly. Just seeing all of these people, and none of them are perfect, and none of them really think that they're perfect, just all struggling to help each other. It's not all just oh, Kingpin killed a guy, can Daredevil prove that in court? But oh, this family who's been living in this building for years is getting kicked out by an evil landlord. And I just really admire how much it goes into the specifics and the small stuff that isn't always delved into with superhero comics or even Daredevil books. And also while questioning Daredevil's role in all of this. I really like how much it kind of just like drills the point into you in a good way, but just like how Daredevil's just some guy, but her second Christmas issue, which is during the clinic era, I love greatly. It's the one with like Kingpin on the cover holding the Daredevil mask. That one in particular, it has so much about what I love about Daredevil and Nocenti's run in particular, of just really going in on like the kinds of people that he's saving and making you really have this like tangible sense of community. And I think that issue also just like really goes into like, you know, where the two characters are at that point, with Matt being like, wow, it's so awesome that I'm friends with all these like, you know, drug addicts and children and stuff. And Kingpin's like, ha, look at him. I really destroyed him. He's with all these drug addicts and children. That issue in particular really resonated with me and my friends spending time together. Sometimes it does just feel like that. Like we're a bunch of just little freaks and weirdos. And like there are angry people out there who are mad at our pure existence for whatever reason. You know, it's just helpful to see people in the book that I like dealing with that stuff too. Something I just like about that like era in particular is the fact that not even everyone, like it's like a brief moment they mentioned that like not even everyone at the clinic is getting help. Like there's so many people there. And Matt's only, you know, he's only helping out with a couple cases. Karen's on the phone as much as she can be, but they mentioned too that like some people are just there to feel safe. Being with people that you like who are maybe dealing with similar stuff can also be its own form of resistance against such a, you know, seemingly evil world sometimes. I really resonate with that issue.
Nocenti spoke about the importance of these themes within her Daredevil run by stating,
I lived in Hell's Kitchen, and I would see a legal aid clinic when I walked around. I said, that's where Daredevil should work. Kids were skateboarding around, there was graffiti, you know, there was some crazy fly shit happening in Hell's Kitchen in the 80s when I was there. So I would take pieces, like a documentary filmmaker, which I would later become. I would take pieces of reality, put it in the comic, and try to weave it into the story. With Daredevil, it's a beautiful setup because he has the vigilante street thing, but he also has the courtroom. So by his nature, there has to be something for a lawyer to wrestle with. Most characters, you don't have to worry about that, but with him, the social justice angle is natural because of his work.
At the same time, Nocenti felt this cognitive dissonance by utilizing these themes, but not addressing the elephant in the room, that is, the superhero has to punch the bad guy. She went on to explain this by stating,
I don't like the tendency in superhero comics for all conflict to be resolved through fisticuffs. Yet, it's an action-adventure medium, so you have to. But fisticuffs gets redundant, and that's hard to deal with. But great action sequences are a blast, so you try your best. But do we always have to pound ourselves out of every disagreement? In other words, yes, I was conflicted about writing fight scenes. I saw them as tumors on the storyline, so it wasn't a strong point in my work.
The internal struggle of both Matt Murdock and Ann Nocenti began to bleed into the pages in issue number 250, which introduced both artist John Romita Jr. and inker Al Williamson. And let me tell you, this issue starts off with a boom. No, like literally, it starts off with a boom. The issue begins with children in a classroom witnessing a presentation on nuclear annihilation. The narration describes the idea of mutually assured destruction with the allusions towards the Cold War and America's increasing anxiety, resulting from the ongoing conflict with the Soviet Union. This paranoia manifests in a child by the name of Lance, who is later revealed to be the son of a newly created villain for hire, Bullet. His fear of mutually assured destruction is paralleled to his fear of Daredevil and his father facing off. While he understands the danger of nuclear annihilation on the world, the collision of these two men would equally decimate his life at an equal severity. Bullet is hired indirectly to allow for a person to bomb the headquarters of a non-profit that is negatively impacting the Kelco Chemical Company. He's ordered to allow for the operation to occur and arresting the one responsible for it. At this point, the government, working in the interest of Kelco, can extract the man to safety, avoiding the discovery of him and the government's involvement by local authorities. As always, Wilson Fisk is the invisible hand influencing these events, because he not only owns Kelco, but also plays a predominant role in the illegal activities throughout all of New York. Kingpin wishes to break Matt Murdock further, destroying his newfound happiness and ensuring that Daredevil loses all faith in the legal system. Due to Matt's aforementioned witnessing of Tyrone being blinded by illegal dumping by Kelko in previous issues, Matt decides to take on the case and act as the family's legal representation. What Matt is unaware of is that the corporate law firm that Foggy is working for currently is also owned by Fisk, and he would be forced to clash with the man that he once called a friend. I did see some critiques that this is just a utilization of Kingpin's motivations that Miller used within Born Again, but I think that that point of view is just too narrow-minded. Personally, I believe that Nocenti is just following Miller's interpretation to the next evolution. It's almost like this improv approach to formulating a story, building on what came before, but also letting characters live out the realistic conclusions. With lesser writers, they might just dismiss the identity reveal to Kingpin out of continuity, but Ann Nocenti almost utilizes it as a challenge to see what this story would lead to. The narrative shows Matt unraveling the web of conspiracy laid by the Kingpin, while Fisk repeatedly attempts to wield his influence to halt any attempts to oppose him, even going as far as to use the legal system against Matt and close the legal aid clinic. And soon he will find out that Matt was unprepared for the lengths that Fisk would go to break both Daredevil and Matt Murdock. Bum 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 bum. In issue number 254, we're introduced to a new villain in Hell's Kitchen vying for her own spot on the totem pole, named Typhoid Mary. She begins her crusade on New York, systematically taking over drug dens that are later revealed to be ran by the Kingpin. Ann Nocenti has spoken about the creation of Typhoid Mary, saying that it spawned from conversations with artist John Romita Jr. She attributes the conversations with John Romita Jr. as a fundamental understanding of Daredevil and his supporting cast, but also the concept of superheroes. She said that in those conversations, they would talk about the duality of identity in superheroes, and saying that vigilantes would have to have some kind of dissociation between their vigilante persona as well as their one that they go home with. Typhoid Mary is the coalescence of the superhero's internal struggle for identity, as she's a woman with dissociative identity disorder, literally having two separate personalities warring over autonomy of one body. After being notified of this villainous newcomer, Wilson Fisk assembles his underground network to discover any information on her and then requesting a meeting. The narration describes Typhoid Mary by stating,
"The child's dual personality was first discovered in infancy. In the Mary persona, she's fragile, sickly, prone to epilepsy and other disorders. As Typhoid, she is utterly unapproachable, uncontrollable, a murderous little girl, pure poison. And, as Typhoid, all symptoms of Mary's sickness, including the epilepsy, disappear. We do know that she runs a constant fever, which may be what alters her body and mind. She screams, occasionally, about being hot in her brain. Only once did Typhoid cooperate with testing, during the telekinetic training, as it was something she wanted to develop. We have documented evidence of Typhoid's erratic ability to move small objects. Mary has no such ability. At this point, the records are vague. Typhoid escaped, taking, of course, her helpless weaker half with her. She turned up a year later as an extremely successful stage actress. Our research shows us that all who encountered her, from acting coaches to directors, talked of her with awe, almost adoration. They believed her destined to become the greatest actress of the 20th century. Again, she disappeared. Her doctors suspect it was Mary that built the acting career, and Typhoid who tore it down. She was last seen in Chicago, launching a new career of robbery and blackmail.
Typhoid is erratic, but determined in her mission of amassing power, which is the last piece in the puzzle for Fisk to finally rid himself of the only man to stand against him. Kingpin calls in Typhoid, contracting her to do something worse than destroying his enemy, but instead targeting both Matt Murdock and Daredevil via her dual identities and breaking his heart. As a result, the story presents Matt succumbing to temptation as he reluctantly falls in in love with Mary. This reluctancy stems from the guilt experienced by his unfaithfulness to Karen Page. Multiple times throughout the story, Matt will contemplate his hypocrisy while also finding Mary's allure to overcome his sense of reason. Inversely, as Daredevil, he's aggressively lusted after by Typhoid. She's domineering and works as an oppositional but equivalent force as it pertains to the reasoning behind why exactly Mary is intoxicating to Matt. It was at this point in my reading that I realized that Ann Nocenti was putting Matt through these trials incorporating the 7 deadly sins. Now, let me explain. These themes are not explicitly stated, but serve as a narrative through line. Matt's affair with Mary could be representative of gluttony, not in the traditional sense, but instead it's a metaphorical overindulgence in a romantic relationship that Matt is aware would negatively impact his significant other. Typhoid is the personification of lust, taunting Matt with his virtues and courting him to break his moral code. Wrath manifests in Matt's ongoing questioning of his justification for brutality. And lastly, the establishing issues serve as Matt's battling of the personifications of greed. Examples of these themes would be utilized throughout the narrative, and I just wanted to highlight them as they arose in the story. For those of you keeping count at home, 4 out of 7 of the 7 deadly sins are on the scoreboard. So editor Kirby, put them on the board. The story of Tyrone's family suing Kelko and the subsequent face-off between Foggy Nelson and Matt Murdock arrives in issue number 255. Although Matt is not present in the courtroom, Foggy is able to decipher the strategies of the defendant's representation as if Matt presented them himself. Obviously, at the time, Matt Murdock is still disbarred and thus legally unable to act as representation, but he did oversee the structuring of the arguments in their development phase and utilizes the acting attorney as a proxy for defense. As Foggy Nelson begins his closing arguments, Matt arrives fashionably late to the courtroom, thus shaking what little confidence that Foggy had, seemingly leading to a general consensus that the jury will find Kelko responsible and therefore required to pay Tyrone's family for damages. Kingpin, unwilling to accept this possibility, issues an order for his team to bribe and/or blackmail jury members to sway the votes. After court adjourns, Matt arrives to Foggy's apartment to scold him regarding Foggy's forsaken morality, choosing to remain employed by Wilson Fisk, foregoing the reason that they both became lawyers. Foggy then immediately crumbles, and as Matt walks out of the apartment, Foggy's girlfriend and Matt's ex, Gloriana O'Brien, berates Matt regarding his moral grandstanding and treatment of Foggy. I feel like this scene is emblematic of Matt's pride, because he's utilizing this holier-than-thou routine towards Foggy. It can almost be read like he thinks he's superior to Foggy, but that kind of falls flat when this demoralizing campaign comes from the same person that is betraying his significant other. I mean, Matt Murdock is a hypocrite, spoon found in kitchen, and he's casting his indignation towards Foggy instead of having any ounce of self-reflection towards his wrongdoings. Also, add another sin to the scoreboard. Typhoid is the one who presents to the selected jury members' home, alluding to threats if the woman falters and leaving a large sum of cash in an envelope for bribery. Later on, Daredevil is outside of the same woman's window of her apartment, questioning if she chose to accept the bribe and contemplating what to do next. It's at this moment that he senses a knife flying at him. It's then that Typhoid appears, seeming feral as she stalks her prey. Daredevil tries to escape her while also luring Typhoid from others that she can hurt, and still she remains in pursuit. As Typhoid and Daredevil battle, she finally gains the upper hand. However, when she has the opportunity to strike the killing blow, she falters. Her inner monologue shows Mary attempting to gain control, stopping Typhoid from murdering the man that she loves. She then escapes with her head in her hands, presenting as Mary had suddenly gained control but unaware of any of the moments leading up to now. Daredevil then returns to the jury members' upstairs window with a menacing scowl. As both Mary and Matt return to their respective apartments, they must wash the physical and emotional grime from themselves, preparing to rejoin society as ordinary people. When Matt presents to the courthouse, both him and Wilson Fisk eye each other up, moments from savagely brutalizing the other, and it's at this point that Matt hands the envelope of cash to Fisk, thus assuring that the jury will find Kelko guilty. Simultaneously, Foggy Nelson also exclaims to Fisk that he will no longer remain under the employment of someone like the Kingpin. What began as almost an assured way to break Matt Murdock's trust in the legal system has now melted away in Wilson Fisk's big, meaty hands, but not for long.
Another favorite issue, I feel like I'd be put on fraud watch if I didn't mention anything with like Mary. Honestly, yeah. I can't even pick a favorite one from the storyline. It's so good. I mean, there's like several moments I like where like Mary's just painting and then Typhoid kind of like kicks in and like wrecks her apartment where she's fighting Daredevil and she's like almost drowning him in the river, but then Mary kind of kicks in and she's like, I can't do this, and she runs off and Matt's all confused. Like, all of these beats with Mary's character, like this contrast between, again, Mary and Typhoid and how they interact with each other, and also how they represent so many of like Nocenti's, I think, like themes, especially when it comes to like female characters. You know, I would say that like Mary, like Typhoid Mary is just kind of like the thesis character for like everything Nocenti's kind of done, you know. Not only, as you mentioned, she's meant to serve as like this personification of like the contradictions, you know, that like Matt Murdock goes through, you know, between his dual identities, his faith and dressing up as like a demon, you know. Like, not only does she represent that, but then also she represents, I think, like, you know, these archetypes with like women and stuff. Like in the Daredevil run, it's like, you know, she represents like it's like the Madonna horror kind of thing, right? Like she represents like the literal both ends of that in like one person. And then, you know, the more she writes with Typhoid Mary, which she, you know, it's in the big thick Typhoid's history paperback, which is really quite good. She expands upon that by having like the man hater and like the cold motherly one, you know, like, and then there's 4 personalities to kind of tangle with, and they all represent such compelling aspects of Mary. But oh my god, I love this character so much. She's so cool.
Something that I feel like I overlooked up to this point is the importance of Karen Page within the ongoing narrative. Nocenti and Romita Jr. are able to fully imbue the reader with a palpable appreciation for the character that I feel like is seldom done for her previously. In the run's predecessor, Miller used Karen as a means to torture Matt of the love lost, and then for her to be his salvation. While I can appreciate his intent and what she means to Matt in this context, the actual utilization leaves a lot to be desired. In Nocenti's run, Karen is a woman that is active in her pursuit to gain independence, but also serving as an equal to Matt.
I also find, just to kind of build off of that, because you were talking about how it's also like a drug clinic, and I also found that Nocenti, I think, was one of the few writers that really handled like Karen Page very well as a result. Because like, it's kind of joked about that, like, you know, she's only really done like super well like in the show, and that's honestly not wrong. I think she's like one of the few instances of like an adaptation of a comic character being kind of better than the source material. And I'm kind of grateful that Nocenti took her in like a really interesting direction, you know. Like there's like this one issue during the run in which, like, you know, she helps Matt like rescue like trafficked children and stuff like that, and then we touch on like, you know, her history, you know, like in LA, I believe it was, like that's where she was. And like I don't know, I think that she shaded in Karen like very, very well.
I really like how Nocenti goes in on just the portrayal of superheroes in the media, and how like Karen even struggles for a bit with like, oh, I see Daredevil on the TV and he's always punching people, but Matt is my boyfriend and he's always hugging me, but he's hugging me with these hands that just punched people. That's kind of messed up. And like, you know, seeing them work through these struggles together, I think is really interesting. And like Karen ultimately having Matt's, like, what would be best for Matt in mind, which, I don't know, I feel like that gets overlooked a lot. I think Karen's so amazing, and a lot of that is here. I like, she's just so great on her own, and like in her portrayal with struggling with her own issues, but also just like wanting Matt to be okay, and then like him growing to be like, yeah, I don't need all this violence actually, but like still feeling like he has to fight back because people are trying to fight him.
Throughout these issues, Karen is almost utilized as a grounding force for Matt, subverting the idea of her being a damsel in distress. The reason that the affair between Matt and Mary cuts so deep is because Karen is a fully realized character. It makes the reader empathize with her plight and also making us feel like we too also victimized her. Daredevil comics work the best when they focus on Matt's supporting cast, but more importantly, when they focus on Daredevil's love interest. Who else is better suited to humanize this larger-than-life hero than his closest confidant? Well, in this case, that would be Foggy Nelson, but that's a video for another day. Issue number 260 begins the inevitable endgame of Fisk as a response to his recurring L's and his quest to break Daredevil. It begins with Daredevil and Karen in their apartment, with Matt espousing on his appreciation for the upcoming anti-war march happening later that day. He is almost delighted by the idea, wishing that he too could participate. In interviews, Ann Nocenti had said that she wanted to dedicate an entire issue to the premise of not throwing a single punch or utilizing violence. Editor Ralph Macchio had shot down the idea because, at the end of the day, it is a superhero comic after all. So Ann settled and put this entire issue with the backdrop of an anti-war parade. The entire issue shows previous villains in the run making their return to fight Daredevil, one after the other. At the end of the issue, Typhoid is the final foe for Daredevil and seemingly murders him as he drops from a bridge, lying lifeless as Typhoid sheds a single tear. Nocenti sought out for the readership to come to terms with the real-life effects of violence, and what better way than to dedicate an entire issue that indulges in the brutality to the point where it's almost difficult to read. And that is the brilliance of this creative team. It's also funny that in later letters pages, people would complain about this issue glorifying violence. And that's actually the antithesis of what they were trying to do. But sometimes people don't get it. Whatever. Ann Nocenti spoke about this issue by stating,
Before issue 259, we had the whole Typhoid Mary storyline, which led up to the Kingpin hiring her to destroy Daredevil. That whole storyline culminates in a double-sized issue where Daredevil fights sort of all of his past enemies, whether in reality or in a hallucinatory form. It's kind of a judgment day for him. It takes place during an anti-nuke rally. I'm dealing with the idea of superheroes as a deterrent for other types of crime, the same way that a nuclear warhead is supposed to be a deterrent against war. So in a sense, you could see warheads as peacemakers in the same way that superheroes see themselves as peacemakers, because they have these powers that are bigger than human, and because of this, they keep the rest of humanity in line, supposedly. But that's only if they stay dormant. These guys don't just stay dormant. They're out there fighting all the time. This double-sized issue is really one big fight, enemy after enemy, but it's got the feeling of a Judgment Day. He's up there, and this is like the last day before he dies, and they're judging him. He's judged pretty harshly, and he doesn't walk away from it. It's a live by the sword, die by the sword sort of thing.
The following issues serve as a reaction to Hell's Kitchen with the absence of both Matt Murdock and Daredevil. With a lesser creative team, this issue might feel like filler, but with Ann Nocenti and John Romita Jr., they've laid this tapestry of complex characters with lives of their own. Karen struggles to hold their newfound happiness together as she is desperate to find her love. Kingpin and Typhoid celebrate, and let's say things get steamy, you know, because she can manipulate fire. Okay, even I rolled my eyes when writing that. The search for Matt and Daredevil continues into issues which are tie-ins to the X-Men event Inferno. I gotta say, it's genuinely impressive that Nocenti is not only able to be cooperative with the line-wide events in her run, but also able to weave these events into the story to further the progression, making sure that readers never feel like any issue is disposable. Akira Yoshida, Put down the katana that you currently have in your hands and start taking notes. When Karen and Black Widow attempt to scour Hell's Kitchen in hopes of finding Matt, he experiences a sort of vision quest. In this time, Stick appears to him, urging for him to get back up and return to the land of the living as his job isn't done. Matt rebels in a childlike defiance, asserting that if he does, he will be hurt again. His mentor scolds him for wallowing in his self-pity, with Matt sinking deeper into a fetal position.
Forget it. Self-pity. As long as you dwell in yourself, in your own petty problems, that's all you'll ever be. A small, scared child. You gotta believe in something bigger than yourself. You hear me?
You mean, like God?
Maybe. Not God, but like that.
But if I fight, I get hurt, and the people around me, they tend to die.
Yes, but you're dead now. You're gone, and they're still dying.
They are?
Sometimes you have to go into the darkness. That's part of the hero's journey. But we slay the dragon and come out bigger. Be bigger than yourself, Daredevil. Slay the dragon. Pump that heart. Breathe. Heal. Live. Slay it. Slay the dragon!
Stick! Help me, Stick! Dad! Mom! I've changed my mind. I want to live! I want it all! I don't care how cruel, how dark, how horrible! I want life! All of it! Give it back! I want it! The despair, the darkness, the fighting, the death. If that's life, I don't care! I want it back! It's dark, but it's mine!
Quick aside, I believe that this is the manifestation of Matt's 6th of the 7 deadly sins, which is sloth. Editor me, go ahead and put that on the scoreboard. During the time of Matt's internal struggle, Typhoid and Mary also struggle for dominance over their shared body. It's as though Typhoid's act of seemingly murdering Matt has further fractured the imbalance of power that she maintains over Mary, causing Mary to grasp at any semblance of autonomy. At the end of this issue, Matt is able to overcome his crisis brought on by the anxieties of returning to the land of the living, only to awake to the revelation that Mary and Typhoid are one and the same. Jumping to the next issue, Matt awakens in a disheveled state and bound to a hospital bed due to suffering severe injuries. It's shown that Karen is watching over Matt outside of his hospital room, viewing him through a window, and he is unable to detect her presence. She's worried about the severity of injuries that Matt has sustained, praying for him to recover so he can return to her. It's at this moment Mary arrives, standing beside Karen, and subsequently revealing that she's had an ongoing relationship with him. Shocked by this revelation and the betrayal by Matt, Karen abruptly leaves the hospital, deciding to navigate the evolving chaos of the outside world on her own. There's a moment that I want to specifically highlight regarding Karen vacating the hospital, and it's when she leaves the building that the demonic presence of the event within Inferno arises. It shows that these demonic entities are courting humanity and telling them to embrace the worst versions of themselves, even the aspects of them that may lay dormant. Cognizant that this is against their better judgment, these demons call out to Karen, tempting her by way of presenting the allure and safety within her relationship with drugs. This is a uniquely dour moment for the series, not only feeling the ramification of Matt's actions, but also how they impact the people that Matt claims to love. It forces the reader to look at Matt through a critical lens, showing that he is flawed and he is not impervious to criticism. It also makes the reader question how Karen will respond. Her life has now been fundamentally dismantled by Matt, so will she retreat to her previous life of substance abuse, or has she earned enough independence to not let this dismantle her future. We return to Matt as he regains his senses, now aware of the demonic presence impacting Hell's Kitchen. He bursts from his bed, springing into action, knowing that although he is burdened by injuries and exhaustion, he is not beaten. And what good is a man of God if he does not take on the devil? The story will then move forward, presenting Matt facing off with a demonic entity that tortures the people of Hell's Kitchen, with the narration stating,
"Can a mere speck, a shredded red thing, a tattered spot, a pinprick of light in the unbounded blackness, can one man change the course of evil? And in the end, will it matter? The failed experiment. The guinea pigs finally comprehend their fate, only when the last shock is delivered and they are numb. One man, one pinprick of light, one small and good act, grabs the demon by the horns and twists its will. And like wrenching an arm backwards, something snaps and changes. The thing catches its breath and spits out the hot fire and brimstone, the purging flame that burns and sears, not the flesh, but the soul. What was it his mentor Stick told the red man? To slay the dragon, to enter the darkness in order to see the light. The red men's club grows bigger, and he remembers something else Stick told him, about getting bigger than oneself. Not God, but like God.
This issue and issue number 265 are a highlight for me, not just because of the writing and composition, but the artistic team and the complexity of rendering, both from John Romita Jr. and for Al Williamson. There's a difficulty for artists to balance the bombastic nature of action scenes with the weight of emotion. Romita Jr. is known for explosive and dynamic set pieces, but this issue and the revelation discovered by Karen lends to the artistic capabilities of him and only elevated by the inks laid by Williamson. Additionally, Williamson ensures that the images are evocative within each scene by the incorporation of thin lining in the emotional beats and scratchy and erratic lining within the battle sequences. This expressive rendering of pencils and inks continue into issue 265 as Matt is facing the demons on the streets of New York, with the portrayal of Daredevil to almost function as a symbol for the return to reality. As he makes his way through the city, the characters are illustrated through loose line work and harsh inking. However, the man without fear remains unfazed by reality as he stands apart from the unrecognizable backdrop due to the artistic team's use of lighter pencils and thinner inking. At the end of this issue, Matt is able to overcome the horde and restore peace to Hell's Kitchen, but there are still the lasting consequences that he is yet to face. Bum 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 bum. Issue number 266 serves as Matt Murdock's reckoning as he faces the reality that he is to blame for his actions, and it's played exceptionally well by the creative team by having Matt spend Christmas in a bar drinking alone. This issue in particular stands out from the rest of the holiday issues because in previous iterations, Matt would be sharing in camaraderie of a newfound family. The dichotomy between the past and the present for Matt is explored in the beginning pages as it shows that Matt is in a bar alone and drinking compared to the rest of the community that is enjoying the holiday. Ann Nocenti spoke about the inspiration behind this issue by stating,
Sometimes I do stupid things that turn out okay. One year, I broke up with my boyfriend a few days before Christmas, and when that festive day came, I had nowhere to go. I was living in Chelsea in New York City, not far from Billy's Topless, a pub known for its strippers and knife fights. On Christmas Day, I watched the world pass by my window, everyone loaded down with food and presents to bring to Christmas dinners. What an alienating feeling to have nowhere to go. I was going to hide all day, pretend Christmas never happened that year, but there was no food in the fridge. Or rather, there was the usual dregs of what consisted of my idea of cooking in my early 20s. 6 packs and a cold pizza. So I took a walk. Nothing was open but Billy's. What the hell, I thought. Why not go in? I had some pathetic tinsel hung in the window that looked downright festive as compared to the black lump of coal in my heart that day. I had one of the best Christmases of my life in that pub. I met other unfortunate souls like myself that had nowhere else to go on Christmas. A lovely, elegant woman who kept lying to us all, claiming a limo was about to arrive with her gentleman date like Blanche DuBois. Two brothers that fought bitterly about the implosion of their family. A few blind men from School for the Blind housing around the corner. As I drank rounds with these strangers, I thought of the comic I was currently writing, Daredevil. I was planning a story arc that was going to blow up Matt Murdock's life. I thought, damn, he could end up here at the end of that arc. So, in the spirit of the camaraderie of that day, I wrote a little tale for a Daredevil story that came out a year later called A Beer with the Devil.
While at first it can be read like this issue was just going to be decompression after the insanity of previous issues, that would quickly change when one person with androgynous features walks into the bar. They are depicted to fluctuate between male and female qualities depending on each panel, which I commend the artistic team's commitment to enhancing the fluidity in their presentation. They begin a conversation with Matt, speaking as if to radicalize him into believing that humanity is a lost cause. All the while, the bar becomes increasingly hostile as people begin fighting and one man murders his brother with little provocation. This goes unnoticed by Matt because, like Typhoid, Matt finds them alluring, and he's unaware of his surroundings. It's only when Matt begins to question their motivations that he understands the purposeful seduction, which it is then revealed that they are truly Mephisto. Way to go, Mephisto. First making out with Matt Murdock and then taking the marriage of Spider-Man. And here I was thinking that you were just a plot device used by aging editors to live out their younger years vicariously through a self-insert character. Oh, that is what he is? Oh, okay, never mind. It's then that Mephisto has one of the coldest reads within the entirety of Daredevil's history by stating,
"I've been watching you. I saw your pathetic betrayals. I heard the sound and fury of your moral voice, your squeaking confusion over the ethical universe, your hypocritical whining over the violence in your life. The lawyer in you always finding a loophole for your selfish self, your self-indulgent cries after you died and didn't want to be born again. You poor wretched baby. All your petty human strutting, all the fly buzzing of your thoughts, all signifying nothing. Do you see, Daredevil, how immense evil is? You used to believe that one man, no matter how small, could fight evil, could defy it, stand up to it, and that you grow to an enormous size by that very small defiance. But you're forgetting that, Daredevil. You're almost mine, Diablo. One day, I'll tip the scales, and you'll welcome me into your arms. You'll embrace me, Redman, willingly, like you just did in the bar. I am not without compassion, and after all, you wear my image. You do my work. The thing I love about heroes is that they've so far to fall."
allowing for Matt to return unscathed, everything but his ego. The ending of this issue spawns the next quest for Daredevil, as he must take a voyage of penance, leaving New York and his life behind and finding who he is beyond the streets of Hell's Kitchen. The arc begins with a few stories that are told as Western vignettes, having Daredevil in the role of the nameless cowboy. If you're unfamiliar, the typical structure of this will have a nameless cowboy come into a town that's plagued by some kind of presence on the townfolk. Then the nameless cowboy will oust that presence and leave before he can be thanked. These issues serve as an opportunity to delve into the deeper subconscious of Matt Murdock, highlighting his isolation. The narration brings back the staccato speech patterns that are notoriously associated with Frank Miller, while the artistic team plays the depressive tone with the use of shadows and negative space. It's not until issue number 271 that we depart from these vignettes, continuing in Matt's journey.
Something else that I think she brings, or at least openly focuses on throughout her run, is Hell's Kitchen in particular. I think there are sometimes during Miller's run where it'll mention, the little meanwhile box in the corner, meanwhile in Hell's Kitchen or something like that. But something that I think is even kind of lost sometimes too is that like Daredevil protecting Hell's Kitchen, like specifically, kind of came from the collateral damage of Born Again, where he was like, oh wow, that happened in this area of the city, and I kind of, because of me, I like got it blown up. I like, you know, I feel the need to protect those people. And like with what you were saying, where it's like, you know, he does that to the best of his abilities, but then still continues to give into this violence, and then kind of is shunned, or, you know, kind of also shuns himself from Hell's Kitchen. It was like, well, where does that leave me? Who am I if I can't protect just the specific area? And I think it's really bold of her to kind of flip, you know, what was rare from Miller's Daredevil is like a positive note about like Matt feeling happier that he didn't have all like, you know, this red tape around him in his life, to flip that over and be like, well, he kind of does need some of it or he goes too crazy. And then to really establish Hell's Kitchen as Daredevil's place, and then to even strip that away from him. I think she, like, what really stands out about her is that she just wanted to put Daredevil in scenarios and like kind of let him as a character like guide the story itself, and then he bumps into people who are also really deep. And the fact that it's like the whole run isn't just a Daredevil Kingpin story, and just how fearless it is in what it tries to tackle, and how Nocenti isn't afraid to flip stuff done from previous writers on its head, or how she isn't like afraid to flip her own stuff on its head and spend half the run in New York focusing on Hell's Kitchen, and then go, well, what if the clinic got burnt, like shut down, and New York was on fire, and Daredevil felt like he was a bad person and had to leave, and like still exploring that, and it all still feels worthwhile. Like, I don't know, sometimes it does feel like Nocenti is a crazy lady, but in a really good way of just like flipping stuff on its head and just rolling with it. I think is just so awesome.
The issue establishes a farm that specializes in the biological engineering of animals to maximize the profits for human consumption. As the farm is explained, the narrative places an emphasis on the living conditions of these animals to be comprised of continued abuse, and Nocenti makes it a point to highlight animal abuse in efforts of asking the reader where we draw the line at the harm caused by humans. At what point does abuse become morally reprehensible? This point is further elaborated upon when it's revealed that this farm hasn't just been applying these practices to animals, but has expanded to biologically alter the DNA of women, hoping to create the perfect woman. The owner of the farm, Skip, who's seemingly modeled after Tom Selleck, is searching to create his ideal partner, which includes a woman who is unable to form an iota of independent thought, thus completely subservient to him. Oh, and she's also indestructible, because why not while you're at it? Skip's biological daughter, Brandy, is shown to be antagonistic towards her father and his treatment of animals. Brandy is not yet knowledgeable of the experiments currently underway on humans. Daredevil arrives to the area after tracking down the source of this drug ring that he had discovered during previous issues. He finds Brandy, and she explains that she intends to out her father's experiments to the press, putting a stop to the farm. Daredevil hesitantly assists in her infiltration of the farm, as he sees her motivations to go beyond the purview of legality, but also the complexity of her actions to be morally gray. After successfully freeing the animals from captivity, they attempt to escape, with the police rapidly approaching. It's at this moment that the test subject that was most recently experimented on awakes and chases after them, believing that Daredevil is the one she is programmed to care for. She escapes with them, evading the police and retreating to Brandy's home to evaluate their next options. The woman has forgotten her name and her true identity, only retaining the knowledge that she is named Number 9, and she is programmed to be the perfect woman and functions to appease men. The dichotomy between Brandy and Number 9 is a meditation on feminist ideology. It critiques subservience and traditionalism, as well as utilizing it as a means to explore what it means to be independent as a woman. This is further elaborated elaborated upon by dissecting the creations of man. Brandy is biological, number 9 is manufactured, and the farm animals are altered, all by the same man. Throughout this story, Matt struggles with his yearning for isolation. He feels that he must continue on his trek in efforts of distancing himself from those that he would form attachments to. It's a self-imposed exile, as he believes that this is the only possibility for harm reduction. Brandy is the one to call out Matt, attempting to not fulfill the duty of a hero, but instead stating that this isolationism is just selfishness disguised as being justified. She's able to break through Matt's aversion to commitment, also utilizing guilt to force him into being a hero that he claims to be, and to fight against her father that is after them. This plot intertwines with the Inhumans, as Karnak and Gorgon seek out Black Bolt and Medusa's son. The child's rumored to have been sent to an undisclosed location on Earth. They arrive to the location of the group as they are tracking signatures of exports from New Adelan. They believe that the child was sent to Earth along with these various exports. It's then revealed that Skip had been contracted by the governmental agencies in efforts of expanding his biological research, obtaining some of these exports from New Adelan, yet the child was not among these materials. Upon this revelation, the group is unsure of the next steps. Enter Dr. Doom. Evan? Issue 275 begins the tie-ins to the Marvel event Acts of Vengeance, which was an effort to have the heroes exchange villains for an arc, explained to be a plot from Dr. Doom to rid the Earth of their heroes. The plot laid by Doom is to have Ultron track down and eradicate Daredevil. Once again, Nocenti and Romita Jr. make the most out of these tie-ins to the ongoing events of this title, because these issues are vital to the progression of the ongoing narrative. Ultron's characterization is one that I find fascinating to read due to the questioning of its preordained programming. Throughout the tie-ins, he asserts that creations can't be perfect because creators are imperfect, causing a mental feedback loop of questioning existence and the futility of perfection. Ultron's mental deterioration continues until he discovers number 9, a woman created to embody perfection. Her lack of imperfection causes Ultron to obsess over her paradoxical existence, and thus taking her into captivity in efforts of rearranging himself in her image. It can't be overstated just how cerebral these issues are, and exploring the independence of women that is divorced from the domineering nature of man's ownership. Moving forward, the group is besieged by Blackheart, the son of Mephisto. Blackheart was introduced in one of the vignettes as talked about earlier, and explained to be the creation by his father to further radicalize humanity towards sin. In the issues moving forward, Blackheart is instructed by Mephisto to corrupt a hero to darkness, proving his worth and the right of him to stand alongside his father. There's multiple attempts by Blackheart to incept this group, playing on their weaknesses to further exacerbate strife. When this doesn't culminate in the intended result, Blackheart brings them into the Netherworld, the domain of his father, to influence the power dynamics of their ability to reject apathy. At the same time, Blackheart also casts Black Bolt and Medusa's child to the Netherworld, which lays the foundation for not only their escape, but also Blackheart's defiance of his father. Each of the characters arrive in hell and are subsequently split into groups, faced with trials of temptation. It's during this time that Matt must make his way alone, the isolation that he claimed to desire now being his ruin. This arc is complex, as there's multiple stories explored through the varying perspectives, but Daredevil's journey serves as the revelation for the run. He must contend with his life of violence, coming to the conclusion that the path forward must be the liberation of oneself through leadership. Since the ramification of issue number 266, the man without fear had been in self-imposed isolation, yet now he understands that he cannot affect change if he is unwilling to lead. It's here that he now understands the recourse of his failures, but also understanding that he cannot be redeemed if he does not face his failures. The group is able to vacate the dominion of Mephisto as Silver Surfer and Blackheart take on the devil. No, really, this arc is not only bonkers, but it also serves as a payoff for Matt's journey leading up to this point in the run. I mean, he went to hell and back, literally, and now he's in the land of the living and there's only one thing left to do: return home. Bum 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 bum. Beginning with issue number 284, we see Daredevil's return to Hell's Kitchen, but the impacts of going to hell and returning to the land of the living have unforeseen consequences. Matt attempts to return to his life of being a costumed vigilante, but he is recurrently plagued by mental visions from hell, obfuscating what is reality. As he is dazed by these visions, a small group of gangsters decide to take this as an opportunity to capitalize on it by beating him senseless. It's at this point that a man arrives to ward off the attackers, with his dialogue embodying someone that Matt should be familiar with, but not only does Matt not recognize this person, but also he's revealed to have amnesia and believing his name to be Jack. Throughout this arc, Matt must rediscover his identity as Bullseye takes on the persona of Daredevil to discredit any goodwill Daredevil had received up to that point. If Kingpin had fundamentally decimated the life of Matt Murdock, then Bullseye would attempt to decimate the life of Daredevil. I do want to highlight something that I found super weird whenever I was doing my research. So in the time that Matt had this persona of Jack Murdock, he had a black girlfriend named Nyla. Ann Nocenti said later on in interviews that the editorial team put a kibosh on Matt Murdock being in a interracial relationship. Keep in mind, Ann Nocenti's run was coming to a close in the beginning of the 1990s. It's pretty weird that they're so antagonistic towards one of their heroes being in an interracial relationship when this is literally the best one that Matt Murdock has ever been in. Getting back to the story, Matt begins having dreams alluding to his previous life and slowly piecing together who he was. He begins naturally gravitating towards areas that he feels a connection to, yet he's unable to understand why. He begins boxing for money, to which he's naturally accustomed. Bullseye begins a mass murdering spree throughout Hell's Kitchen, hoping to draw out his rival to finish him once and for all. Ben Urich begins investigating the actions of this new Daredevil because he knows that Matt can't be too far if Daredevil has returned. This is when he tracks down Foggy Nelson, who has used Matt's disappearance as the inciting incident to begin the process of untangling the destruction of Matt's life at the hands of Wilson Fisk. Foggy hopes that he can rebuild Matt's life, that it will be his own way of repenting for his role in betraying their intentions of helping others. Foggy believes that him abandoning Matt and moving to corporate law has played a role in the exploitation of the innocent, and Foggy can't reconcile his involvement. He even went as far as to get Matt's license reinstated. Foggy needs Matt to be his guiding light. Matt is able to finally regain his memories during a boxing match, experiencing a parallel of his father's last fight. Once aware of the current plot laid by Bullseye and Kingpin, Matt decides to don the costume of Bullseye, hoping to exacerbate his own mental decay. He squares off with Bullseye, each wearing the costumes of the other. Finally, Matt is able to overcome the man who has plagued his life, regaining his costume and ascending back to his life as Daredevil. I feel like this interaction is the manifestation of envy for both Matt Murdock and Bullseye. Bullseye resents the idea of Daredevil and wants to deplete any meaning from that mantle. And Matt resents Bullseye's bastardification, if that's a word, of the mantle and what it means. And that's it for the 7 deadly sins. I bet you didn't think I remembered the 7th one. In the final issue, Daredevil must face off with Bullet once again and regain the trust of the public. This serves as a narrative endpoint for his reclamation of his role as Daredevil, fighting the villain that began his spiral and proving to himself that he is truly born again. Ann Nocenti's Daredevil is my favorite Daredevil run. While I can acknowledge that Frank Miller did a lot for the character and revitalizing him, I think that I have the most enjoyment when a creator comes onto a book and utilizes the previous continuity to weave their own story. That's why I hold so high Ann Nocenti and Mark Waid's runs on the character. They utilize all of the character's history and formulate their own personification and characterization of what Daredevil means, as well as what Matt Murdock is. I talk about it all the time, but Frank Miller secluded Matt Murdock just to Hell's Kitchen, and Ann Nocenti continued the tone, but brought him into the wider 616 Marvel universe. Nocenti also utilized the platform to tell poignant stories that were an actual reflection of the world outside of your window. And if that's not Marvel, I don't know what is. Okay, that's going to be enough out of me. If you like this video, go ahead and like the video, and then subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I also want to extend a thank you to Lord Edge and my patrons over on Patreon. If you want to support me and the channel, you can go ahead and subscribe for as low as $1 a month, where you get these videos early, as well as access to the community Discord. And if you want to watch more of me, I'm going to put a video over to the right that you can click. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but you can click it and I'm sure it's pretty good. Oh, and one last thing. Go read some comics. Or else.